Did you know that trees talk to each other? That they share resources and they help each other out, just like human beings. They're highly interconnected, dependent on each other. It's actually called the mycelium system, MyClium, and the indigenous people knew about it for a long time, but it's about the whole root system that's underneath the forest. And Bob, husband of artists, likes to call it the underground Wall Street, the exchange of information. Talk to him later about a hedge fund. That was a joke. Anyway, okay, I tried. Um, anyway, of course, the indigenous people knew about taking care of the ground or the earth underneath the surface. It was a woman in the late 1980s in British Columbia who started to challenge the lumber company up there because she noticed they were cutting trees down, then they go plant these fir trees, and the fir trees would die. Well, because their buddies weren't there. They needed the birch. And so she was challenging them, Dr. Suzanne Simard. And now it's a well-known belief and scientifically proven fact that it's also called the mycorrhizal fungi system. I dare you to say that 5 times, which is really cool. So I received an email from Auric Gallery was it January, February of 24, inviting me to create a body of work to have a show. And I was really thrilled and surprised, and it was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I had to come in and see which space, and I said, oh, I can handle this. But the big question was, what was I going to paint? So I'm going to try to answer the question of how did I go from I don't know what to paint to creating these. So like life, it's a conversion of many things: events, information, people, painting. And I journaled, I walked, I paced. I walked in the forest. And then I realized that, no, that's really not going to work. You got to paint. As I was talking to someone earlier, thinking about it just doesn't quite do it. We like to think we can paint up here someplace or here, but it doesn't quite work. But I did revisit my intentions I've had my entire art career. I've always had the intention of creating color harmony, which creates a sense of beauty. The other intention is to create a sense of depth. And I love taking the two-dimensional surface and sort of making you want to go in and get the 3D sensation. And then the other intention is to create a sense of intrigue or mystery. So, okay, got that, check, check, check. But what are you going to paint? And I put a lot of expectation. I wanted to create something that would make people stop. I wanted to create something different. I wanted to create something that was thought-provoking and also emotionally challenging. So so this is now the spring of 24, and I'm painting. There are several paintings underneath these paintings because I would just paint and, well, that doesn't work. Something's not working. Now, the first decision I did make was I asked myself, what is your favorite color to mix with? And I said turquoise. So Tricia kindly is modeling that color. And this is how many tubes of turquoise I own. Just a little, I had no idea. But it also shows the incredible range of turquoise. And you can't really mix turquoise. And then I learned about all the different characteristics of some of these paints. Some of them were transparent and opaque. So then I decided, okay, I'm going to create color palettes based on turquoise. So went online and looked up various color palettes using turquoise. And I'll pass this around. And then I made swatches to go along with this. And there's like 7 or 8 of them. And then, so each of these paintings basically has one of these color palettes in there. I'd never done anything like that before. It was really kind of fun. I also discovered that turquoise is a spiritual stone in many cultures, which is reinforced that I wanted to work with it. The other decision, which wasn't really a decision, was to continue working in my favorite medium, which is oil with cold wax. So I brought you a little sample of cold wax. It's kind of like Crisco, so you can stick your hands in there, but I don't suggest that you fry with cold wax. But you can pass that around. And the reason why I like the cold wax so much is that it gives body to the oil paint. It also allows me to create all kinds of textures. So one of my favorite tools is this guy right here. And you can see me in the studio sometimes with 3 in one hand and 1 in another. And I'm doing this, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this. This is kind of like my paintbrush. And then, pot holders are great. You can go around and probably find some of these. I think this is a shelf thing. Cardboard. And this is another, this comes out of the kitchen, basically, originally. It's a bowl scraper. We use this end. Bakers use this side. It's soft. That's another way to apply the paint. You'll notice in some of the paintings that I actually, this is all scraped off using a tool like this. So there's been multiple layers put down, and I don't really know what's underneath. So there's a few paintings where that's quite evident. It's really kind of, so I really like the physicality of the cold wax and oil. The other thing I did was I read an article many years ago by a gallery owner who suggested there are certain guidelines that he recommended if you wanted your body of work to look cohesive. And he said you could create a body of work where every painting is the same size. The style is similar from one painting to the next. The color scheme is the same throughout. Subject matter relates to each other. Art materials are similar. And then framing or presentation. He said you don't need all 6, but you just need 2 or 3 if you want to kind of convey a cohesive body of work. So March through September was just paint and more paint. This is exhibit frustration, whatever number you want to call it. But basically, there were multiple layers of paint on this board, and I just took that tool and I scraped every ounce of paint that I could off of it. I said, this is really cool. Okay, how do you do this again? And how do you make it into a body of work? I have no idea. And do I want to paint on top of this? I have no idea. But just gives you an idea of some of the process that I was going through. Meanwhile, last summer is actually the first time I heard the word mycelium, and tree portals and all kinds of books on trees were showing up. And I've lived amongst the trees most of my life. In fact, Bob and I live in Black Forest. As always happens in anybody's artistic life or whatever your profession is, life shows up to throw up a few interruptions. My life challenge the last 5 years has been my health. And I was diagnosed 5 years ago with a blood cancer called multiple myeloma. And it's sort of an active, smoldering cancer that I've kept at bay, which is a good thing because I don't need treatment. But what I live with is the anxiety and the unknown. And when will that active, smoldering cancer become the real deal. The other thing that I was dealing with the last few years is several surgeries, and then we had a surprise in October. So my first painting, which is I did create one for the series, and then one Saturday night in October, experiencing severe pains, sat in the ER parking lot for 10 minutes, going, I really don't want to go in. You go in, and all of a sudden they're doing their thing, and all of a sudden there's an uptick in the ER room, and there's doctors and nurses and machines, and you're going, okay, we're getting close to midnight, and you have a life-threatening situation here. You have a twisted intestine. And so I had emergency surgery in the middle of all this to sort of keep me alive. It's like, okay, you could have died. Didn't know that. So after that recovery, the next painting was the one on the far right. And I was really getting excited about what I was creating. And I became obsessed over the winter in creating these series. And then shoulder pain started to show up. And I've been getting shots for a year and a half. Interesting, I could still paint, but I couldn't use a hairdryer. I don't know how that works, but anyway, the surgeon said, yeah, just let me know when you need to have this thing replaced. And I said, okay, I'll just do it in November of 25. No, the shoulder said, no, you got to do it. So April 1st was surgery, so I painted until March 30th. And I'm really glad I did, because I thought I would be able to paint in July and August. No, shoulder said no. So I'm going to back up. A really fun thing happened in February. An artist friend came over as I hung up some paintings, because, I'm a little nervous here. Nobody's seen these paintings. Does anyone else get it? Is it interesting? So that meant that I had to clean up my studio and put it up on the wall. And I have a loft office, so I have a 2-story wall, and there were 2 paintings up above. So I hung up the new paintings, stood back and looked up, and I went, Carol, you've been painting about this for a long time. Those paintings can go into the show. So these 2 large ones were actually done several years ago, and then one more over here. And that was very exciting to discover that I had been doing this for quite some time. The one that to me that kind of was a little spooky is the one where the electrical pulses are going across the bottom of the roots. And this is before I knew anything about mycelial. And so it's just sort of how the subconscious had come forth. And then even I started noticing other paintings. This is a painting that could be in the series. You can pass this around. Again, the roots are down on the bottom. And so my painting process, and I encourage you to try the QR code on here, is very intuitive. And I start with a color palette. That's the only decision, and the size of the panel. And then I just literally start to paint. I use all the different tools. I use the colors within that color palette. It's a very crazy chaos. People ask me, do I paint about my cancer? Yes, no, maybe. It's because it's a part of who I am. And I think some of that anxiety and that and uncertainty living with that comes out in that beginning part of the painting process. But painting is really important. It keeps me grounding. It's a great coping mechanism, if you will. So about 2/3 through the painting process, the painting and I start having a conversation. And there's lots of paint, and I'm turning things around. It's, you know how novelists sometimes talk about how their characters lead them through the story and develop their personalities. I think it's similar to that. And so this is a little more intentional intuitive process because I wanted the roots to be a part of the painting. But I never know exactly how it's going to end when I start. And these paintings are not purely abstract like many of my paintings before this show. I like the surrealism, the sort of fantasy land. So upon reflection, it was just really exciting to discover that I've been painting about the root system, but also using the horizon line to encourage us to look at the seen and the unseen. Are we taking care of ourselves above the ground as well as internally? Are we to make sure that our souls and our passions are not being ignored, so that we do take some time to go deeper into ourselves and the world around us. So that is my information so far tonight. Anyone have any questions or comments? And I'm also one of these artists who I do not put out the same tube of paint every time I paint. A lot of artists do that, but that's illegal for me. No, I got to have a different setup of tubes of paint. I created this little booklet, describes each one of the paintings, and they will have some of these up front if you're interested in this. And I was also in the Spring Insider art magazine. Now with a little insert in here. So, yeah, and then there's a lot of timing that goes on. If you let it dry completely, then I can't do any of the digging or removing. Yeah, so there are times where I go, okay, I put a layer. I need it to dry for 2 hours, which is really nice in Colorado because it's pretty reliable. And I know I need to come back because before that it's too wet. But if I wait 2 or 3 hours, then it's still a little sticky and I can put more paint on it and do a variety of things. So there's really kind of a cool balancing dance act that goes on. And people often ask, when do you know when to stop? And my answer is when it no longer bugs me. When the painting no longer bugs me, then I stop. So there's no and that seems to work pretty well. Now that doesn't mean that 6 months or 6 hours later I find something that does bug me, but generally that's what. Okay, great. Thank you very much.